How do you view the South Carolina football program in regards to what it can be?
This is a very important context because what you said there is what it can be. A lot of people get hung up on defining what can be as what has been. And sometimes that's true, but it doesn't have to be. It's not because it has to be. If something continues, it's because the factors that are still in place are going to produce the same results you've always gotten. Listen, I stumble upon about 2 or 3 smart sounding quotes per year. That's about my average. And one of the best ones that I had, and I use it at every turn now. I use it when I'm talking about cornbread recipe, if I can, is these folks who get hung up on history and tradition, and Carolina can't be this because they haven't been that. And I may have even been on Keith's podcast. I can't remember where I was, but I said essentially, you're talking about history so much, you got to make history to have history. There's only one way to get it. At some point, no one had history and tradition. So how in the world did they get it? Obviously, if everyone who has it now at some point didn't have it, the limiting factor wasn't the history. If you had to have it, no one would ever have it. That's one of those great paradoxes that makes your head hurt if you think about it. But as it relates to Carolina, I know no one likes to hear the name Clemson, but if we take out Clemson, remove the Tiger Paw, just look at the model. My question to anyone who says it can't happen is how'd they do it? There's no advantage Clemson has. There's no big monetary advantage. There's no big facility advantage. There's nothing baked in at Clemson that you can't have at Carolina. I understand fan bases would disagree, but they're emotionally attached. So you ask me as a national guy just flying over. That's how I think about that. Now, there is an advantage that you have a softer path in the ACC. But at the same time, when Clemson's gone up against the big boys, they've more than held their own. So it's not like they're inferior, just skating by. So how does that happen there? I'm going to tell you exactly how it happens. Number one, they made a very off-the-radar hire, which is very similar to what Carolina did with Beamer. So let's hope that that plays out at least fractionally to the degree that Dabo ended up playing out. But here's really what it comes down to. In this day and age, the name Braden Davis is as important in this equation as any name, possibly including Shane Beamer, because I think revisionist history looks back on what Dabo did at Carolina, and it's they hired him, and then he started winning titles. Now, folks closer to it understand, now that ain't the way it happened. And there were some years where they thought they had arrived and then got just splattered all over the field a couple of times. But what happened was they had a kid named Taj Boyd there, and he was a very solid quarterback. But it wasn't until that Deshaun Watson kid comes in that all of a sudden Clemson goes from being this nice regional story to, oh my goodness, they're going to the national title game. Oh, they almost beat Bama next year. Oh, they did beat Bama. Well, then a kid like Trevor Lawrence is watching. And then the kid like DJ Uiagalelei is watching him. What happens is if you get the quarterback dominoes to fall, it takes one. You got to have a great one. You got to hit a grand slam on one. It's got to be good evaluation and development. But if Braden Davis, let's just say, is the guy that they need, is the fit. When he comes in, wide receivers watch that, running backs, all the big players, defense and offense, want to play with a good quarterback. The key is as simple as getting quarterback right. It sounds so simple. I know it's much more complex, but if Shane Beamer does nothing more than wins the fan base emotionally and gets quarterback right, he will have kicked the snowball downhill that I don't even think the most optimistic of Carolina fans could imagine, well, at least what it leads to, could imagine, because it's very hard to picture that because you hadn't seen it, at least in a short generation, you haven't seen it. If they get that right, I know Georgia's there, I know Florida's there, I know all that, but listen, you don't look at it. You look at it very much in the abstract. You just worry about yourself because that's really all you control anyway. If you get quarterback right and the rest of the recruiting apparatus works itself out, which it absolutely would, all the rest of that stuff just ends up taking care of itself. And then you're floating. I agree with your assessment. In any given year, this program should be able to float at a 9-win per year caliber. Any given year, who knows what the balance of the ball does, but that's the caliber program it could be. And I think at its best, it's more than a once every 4-year contender for the conference title. I think at Carolina's best, it's a once every other or once to every 3-year type contender. Of course, that's over 1,000 simulations and whatnot. But yeah, if you get quarterback figured out, man, it'd be amazing. I think people would be very amazed. I think some jaws would be on the ground at what could be possible there if you got the right culture fitted head coach, and that head coach also gets quarterback figured out. A lot of other stuff starts rolling simultaneously.